budding actors of Rocks and Logs. While I sort myself out here, do you want to just turn to the person next to you and say, "You look really good today"? There you go. All right. All right. Well, welcome to Alstonville. Today is the 31st of December. Congratulations, we've made it to the end of another year. And first of all, if you're going, who is this guy up the front? And you're a visitor and you're going, who's this guy up the front? Firstly, welcome. Welcome to Alstonville. And just know that you're probably not alone, because there's probably some members here that are going, who is this guy and what is he doing up the front? So Data has sort of been asking me to preach for a while, and I kind of changed the subject, and oh yeah, the weather's nice, and don't really answer his questions. And then finally I agreed to preach on the 31st of December, and I thought, oh, you know, there won't be that many people here, and well done, you've turned up. And especially a shout out to quite a few from Sydney that made the trek up, not for my sermon, might I add, to come up on holidays, and here I am. So look, a disclaimer, for those of you that know me, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a speaker. I work for Lifeline, and I've spent most of my life working, big part of my working life around not-for-profits and charities. So go and be nice to me, and at worst, just tell Data that the sermon was okay. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here together as a church, as a family, at the end of a year as we look back and also look forward. Thank you for everything that you do in our lives. Thank you for the things that you've done for us this year. I pray that you will be a huge part of what we plan as a church, how we invest, and the things that we do in our local community in 2023. Amen. If you're able, I'd love you to stand up for a second and stretch the legs again. Just relax. I'm not going to break into song. We're not going to do another song. But I just want to play a little game. I'm going to count from 1 to 10, and I want you to sit down when I get to the number that kind of represents 2022 for you. So if it was a 2 out of 10, when I hit 2, sit down. If it was a 10 out of 10, stay standing until I get to 10. I'm interested in who has had what they think is the best year. All right, everybody know what we're doing? Everyone thought of their number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You going at 5? It's sort of average. 6, 7, 7s, 8, 8, 9, a few 9s, 9.5s. We've got some 10s over here. So well done. Why 10?
This is the year that I've been introduced to the church and getting to know God. So
Awesome.
And it's been a very full year as well.
Awesome. The rest of you, 10 because?
Well, the year's had some downs,
Yep.
but they've all been solved.
Yep.
Thank you to the Lord. And this is the first time in 3 years that I've been able to come and see my daughter and my grandchildren and my son-in-law in 3 years.
Well done. Welcome back.
And
It's
it's a 10.
a 10. And the rest of the fam bam back there?
For me, it's probably been one of the hardest years of my life.
Yep.
But it's had the most blessings as well.
Yep.
So, other than the family
Yeah, it's been awesome. Final word, anything extra to add?
Probably because when we moved up here, we were more drawn to God, and when we came to this church, it was so welcoming and loving, and it made me feel like I was loved and see like a lot more people than just my family care for me, like all new people. And
Awesome. Why am I preaching? We should just do this benediction now and be done with that. That was awesome. So that's good. There was some threes, I think, there, some fours, quite a few fives, quite a few tens. That's awesome. Who's up for New Year's resolutions? Is it a thing or is it not a thing in your lives? Yes? No? Yes? They've got some big nods going on. There's some people that, nah, not really a thing. I mean, I guess the thing with the New Year's resolution is nothing's going to change unless you make the choice to make that change, right? It's not like we instantly have January 1 comes and life is changed and rosy and all the rest of it. It's the same as December 31. It's this arbitrary change. But it's a chance for us to recalibrate. And if we want to make a change and want to make a choice to make some changes, it's a good time to do it. It's always a good time to do it. You don't have to wait till January 1. If you want to make a resolution, make it on March 1 or August 1 or whenever. Make the change. But yeah, January 1 is, and the start of the year is, for some people, and a lot of people absolutely do it. And I must admit, I've never really been a guy that does New Year's resolutions at all. But last year, I made a New Year's resolution. And my New Year's resolution was to ride 5,000 kilometres on my bike. So that's about 100 Ks a week. And I normally do somewhere between 35 and 50 on a ride. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to do this, and I can do this. I can do this. And for the first 8 weeks, things were pretty good. Things were pretty good in what I was doing. I was disciplined. The sun was shining. It was warm. It was easy to get out of bed, and things were going really good. And then things didn't go so well about February 28, and if you remember around that time, there was a little bit of rain up here, and a lot of things changed from a work perspective, things didn't quite get to 5,000. Any guesses about what I did get to? Some of you in this room probably know this, so if you do know the answer to that question, just exclude yourself. Any guesses? 3.5. I like your optimism. I really do. Logan? 4,000. Lower. 2.5. Pretty close. 2,000 and change. So a long, long way off. And I guess life just happened, right? It wasn't like I didn't want to do it, or I fell out of love with it, or I hated it. It was just stuff got in the way. Work got incredibly busy. There was lots of stuff that obviously Lifeline was doing around the place as part of our flood response in the region. It was pretty stressful, rebuilding our own offices and everything that went along with that. And I just kind of went, all right, I just can't be bothered writing. And there was no one there going, Michael, where are you? Like, I'm here on the corner of whatever waiting for you. Like, where have you been? Like, my bike wasn't screaming out saying, I missed you, come back and ride. So it was just easy to not ride. So let me show you a couple of pictures. Rustin, what am I doing here? Do I just pointing. Oh, Charlotte's running. Oh, here we go. So, if anybody's seen that small child recently, can you just let me know where he's gone? Because he got really big. So I used to love, I've got 2 bikes. I actually don't tell my wife I'm eyeing off a 3rd bike. But as I said in the children's story, like the big knobbly tyres, coming home muddy and disgusting was what it was all about. And then I got a little bit over 40, and the bruises sort of took a little bit longer to disappear, a few more aches and pains. The steepness and the rocks looked bigger and bigger and bigger. And I went, oh, I'm not sure if I like that anymore. And then I got one of these bikes, and I realised that it was absolutely okay for a middle-aged man to dress in Lycra from head to toe. And so that is my bike. That's a few of my bike travelling around the northern rivers with me. Also, it sometimes goes in the back of my car when I have to go away for work, and sneak a few rides in here and there. And it's much easier to do lots of kilometres on a bike like that rather than the other bike. Here are some good-looking roosters. This was earlier this week when I just ticked over 2,000 kilometres with these guys. We had a great ride down to Ballina and back. The back part up to Alstonville is not as fun as the part to Ballina. There's a really large hill in the way, but we had a great time. So if there's anybody out there that is not in this photo, and I'm thinking of you, Brendan Carville, that is not in this photo, we'd love to get as many people that are riding bikes around Alstonville. Come and have a ride, because it was a lot of fun. So I'll just leave it on that one. My 3 most favourite stories in the Bible. The first is Joseph, without doubt. Love Joseph and everything that's about. The Good Samaritan, that story kind of really sort of, definitely inspired me in some of my work choices and what I chose to do with my life around work. And I won't tell you the whole story of how I ended up in not-for-profit land, but really this desire to, live this sort of practical Christianity that came with the Good Samaritan and the story of the Good Samaritan. Very, very favourite story of mine. And the third one is the prodigal son. And that's the story we're going to talk about today. And if you've got your Bibles, I'd love you to turn to Luke 15. It's only found in Luke. We're going to just read it from go to woe. So it starts Luke 15 in verse 11 and goes to 31. And I actually forgot to bring my Bible. So if anyone doesn't have a Bible, there are plenty down the back, because I actually just grabbed one. And just when you're there, just raise your hand. I know that you're there. Yeah, we've got a few people. Yeah, we're there. All right, let's go. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So they divided his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed the swine or the pigs. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I will perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Bring out the best robes and put it on him, and put a ring on his hands and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to be merry. Now the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf." But he was angry, and he would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, "Lo, these many things I have been serving you. I've never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is now found." Now Christians love that story. I love that story. I think there's part of us that, we all love that story. It has so many hallmarks of a good Hollywood script even. There's that drama, the loss, the tension, the happy ending, the reconciliation that goes with that. And I think what I mostly love about that story is that I can see myself in that story. And as the prodigal son that came back home, I kind of have a bit of a weird association with the story because, in the context of leaving and going to the far-flung land and coming home again, I don't necessarily feel like I ever left the house and left the church. And so in some ways, maybe I'm a little bit like the lost coin rather than the lost son, because I was still in the building, so to speak. But for whatever reason, I kind of feel very much like that lost son that returned. I grew up in the Adventist church. I had a fantastic upbringing. Loved my family. Loved the church that I went to. Went to an Adventist school. Tick, 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 tick. All of those boxes. And I got into my my late teens and my early 20s, and like most kids, kind of had that little rebellious phase. And it wasn't, I was old enough to be an adult by that stage. I was making my own decisions, and it wasn't necessarily a rebellion against my parents or necessarily a rebellion against the church. And maybe it was just the fact that I was kind of a bit sick of being the good guy, and the curiosity of what was over there, what the grass on the other side of that fence, is it actually greener? And so I did. I went out and searched that other green paddock, or what I thought was a green paddock. And, you know, the paddock definitely wasn't green. I made some poor decisions in my life. I don't necessarily have a criminal record or any tattoos to show for that, but I definitely made some poor decisions in my life, and I look back on that time and some of the decisions that I made, and there's times where you go, oh gee, that was really stupid, why did I do that? Or I wish I didn't do that. Some of those decisions actually make me who I am, and just like the prodigal son, you know, did he appreciate what he had at home if he had stayed at home the whole time? I don't know. But for me, coming home, coming back to a church, the same church, the church that I technically hadn't really left, but came back and invested into that, and realised that that was where my priorities, where my heart was certainly made me value and want to commit to it more than before, when I guess I was kind of just plodding along. And I learnt that you can't have a foot in both camps. I learnt that you can't, you know, my Monday to Friday life was completely different to my Sabbath life. The circle of friends, the behaviours that would exist on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday were completely different. It really wasn't sustainable. And I look back on it and realise kind of how exhausting that was. But I know my experience of that other paddock, that distant land, is definitely not the same experience for many people that come through the doors of our church here, or also our wider church. And, you know, the fact that around 62% of young people that attend a church in Australia leave before they're 30 suggests that there are a lot more prodigal sons still out there in the paddocks than are back home with their father. And so when Data asked me to preach, and then we talked about, it was the 31st of December and New Year's resolutions and some of the plans and the things that we as a church are going to commit to, you know, I started to dig a little bit deeper in research. And when I say research, I'm talking about Googling, right? You know, some of the things are, yeah, they're pretty shocking. In the period 1965 to 2015, 34 million people in the world were baptised in a Seventh-day Adventist church. That's good numbers, right? That's a lot of people, 34 million people. But of those, 13 million have left. So a significant amount of people come, see, are part of our family, and then make a decision to leave. And, you know, I don't think the numbers for the global church, while the percentages might be a little bit different, like talking to Data, and I've been part of this community for 2 years, and you know, we absolutely love it here, but you know, hearing some of the stories around this church, I'm not sure that it's significantly better or worse in terms of the number of people that have been here as part of this family over time that have made the decision to leave. And some of those people have left to move away and to other parts of Australia. And there's other people that are still here in our community that have made a choice not to be here. So I did a little bit more digging. I was like, what, you know, why is that? Why are people leaving? And you know, for every single one of those people, there's obviously a story that goes with that about why they've made a choice. But you know, I found some really interesting Seventh-day Adventist research that had been done, and some studies that had been done on why people were leaving the church. And you know, one of the things that I found, was really interested with was in one of the studies where they tracked down a whole heap of people that were willing to still, I guess, talk to somebody from the church, even though they had left, asked some survey questions, and they said, do you still believe in the authority of the Scripture as taught by the SDA Church? 79% of the respondents said that they still believed in the authority of the Scripture. Do you still believe there are benefits to Bible study? 90% of people that had left still said that. Frequency of Bible study before leaving the church. Like what were your habits before you left? So about 30% said they were daily, 40% said 1 to 3 weeks, and 1 month or greater, 30%. So 70% of those people that left were definitely not in a habit of daily Bible study. And then if you sort of condense all of the reasons and put it all in together, which is really, really dangerous, right? Because there's so many of those individual stories. But why did they leave? And the research sort of put it all together, and I thought highly of it, but I had lost touch. I thought highly of it, but I felt I could not live up to its standards. I felt that it lacked integrity in its behaviour or its theology. It had just really become irrelevant in my life. I was angry over the way it treated me, or I felt that it was cold and inflexible. Now, as I've got a little bit older, obviously I have a young family, and some of the stats around young people become even more sobering for me. You know, I look at the people that I grew up with in church, and I know, you know, I've got plenty of friends that would fit into those categories of, I still believe, but are not actively participating and investing for whatever reason. But I'm involved in primary Sabbath school. We have on average 10 people, 10 kids in Sabbath school every week. You know, by the time they're 30, to suggest that only 4 of them are still going to be in the church, it's heartbreaking. Pathfinder's going to Camporee next week. Of the 25 odd that are going, the stats say that probably 15 will be gone by the time they're 30. I mean, it's just not right. And it's easy to say it's them, right? It's them. People moved out of the church because they had an argument, or there wasn't something right, or they just didn't fit in, or it was them. It was them. And it's easy to preserve self by blaming others. And that's not necessarily about church, but that's just conflict generally, right? It's just of that natural default position to go, well, nothing wrong with me. I'm never wrong, surely. It's a lot harder to look inwardly and ask ourselves the question, what is my role in this? Or how have I contributed to this? And I guess as sinners, we always should recognise ourselves in that story of the prodigal son. There's the prodigal son in all of us, right? I'm definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed at any time. But as I've got older and I've become more invested in the church now, I start to recognise my responsibility in the role of the father in that. Now, I'm not for 1 minute saying that I'm God, but the story, like how do we as a church represent the role of the father in that story? And as I said, like how do we look at that? How do we look at those statistics of loss? And how do we talk about, like, what is our role in that? And how do we contribute? And I guess what I'm about to say, like, I don't want this to come across as heretical. And I'm not saying that we should compromise on our beliefs, but as a church that's been really, sort of rooted in some of its identity and its theology about being correct, about biblical insight, present truth, this extreme sense of the debate, we kind of like that sometimes. Do we risk kind of being that Pharisee in the story of the prodigal son? Like, the story was specifically told to the Pharisees. So I guess do we risk becoming the Pharisee that the story was specifically told to, or the older brother when the prodigal son prodigal son returned home? And have I, coming home to the church, become like the older brother when I subconsciously or consciously judge others on that journey of where they are on that journey and whether or not they come home? And in preparing for this sermon, I came across a blog post by a Canadian Baptist church pastor by the name of Paul Sadler. And his words really resonated with me, and it seemed more eloquent than anything that I'm probably saying right now. So I wanted to name him because I'm just going to read it. I'm going to read exactly what he wrote. And he said, "It must have been heartbreaking for Jesus to be confronted with a religious community whose values were so completely out of step with the Father's. The Pharisees were concerned about their own status and their own righteousness, but not with the lost. Their needs had become primary, and they resented Jesus giving attention to people they felt that were not worthy of him. His depiction of the selfish, brooding older brother who is thinking about how he should be rewarded instead of celebrating the return of a lost brother confronts this attitude directly. It is easy for a church to become consumed with its own needs, and for believers to focus on good pursuits like Bible study and personal growth while missing the heart of the Father through their failure to embrace his pursuit of sinners. Jesus is calling the church to share the Father's compassion who looked for the prodigal son, and while he was still a long way off, and when he saw him, felt compassion and ran and embraced and kissed him." Now, I'm not saying that Bible study and personal growth, like, we should throw all that out. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But it's all about everything in balance. So, back to bikes, because I do like talking about bikes. So, Nathan Brown's not here today, so we can talk lots about him. Nathan actually took this photo as we were riding up from Ballina to Alstonville. And if you've driven up there, you know how steep it is. If you ride up there, you know how steep it is. And he took this photo. He's actually riding his bike at the time. And I posted this on Facebook, and my beautiful wife that I love dearly wrote a comment along the lines of, "Nathan took this photo and still had time to beat you up the hill." And it's true. And it is absolutely true, because Nathan well and truly beat me up the hill. And he sat at the back encouraging me to get up the hill. And we got there. And for the guys that rode this week, you know that Nathan is pretty quick up most of the hills. But the name of the game for most guys on a road bike is to go faster. We want to go faster. And there's lots of ways to go faster. You know, you can get a little bike computer that sits on the front, which I've now got, which sends all sorts of data to you, tells you how fast you're going, how slow you're going, how much further to go up the hill. You've been up this hill quicker before, so hurry up. You know, it tells you all of this stuff. And then bike riders generally get into, I could upgrade my bike here, let's get some carbon wheels, let's do this and that, let's spend thousands and thousands of dollars in the pursuit of going faster. And most of that is about being more aerodynamic and about being lighter. But in that picture, where is all the weight? It's in me, it's not in the bike, right? And how do I get more aerodynamic to go faster? Do I buy carbon wheels, or do I do something about me? It's about me. And so, but generally bike riders go, I just want a new pair of wheels or something like that. So there's things that we can do to get faster on a bike. So I could tuck down, I can get my hands under the hoods, they call it, and on the drops rather, and I can get my back flatter, but that really starts to hurt my back after a while, so I don't do that enough. But that resists, the air resistance is better. I'm not dragging through the air, which generally makes me faster. And if you've seen a Tour de France race or any sort of bike race where there's a group of people riding together, they're going faster. And so, what's the quickest way to go faster? Get Nathan Brown out in front of me, and I'll generally be faster for two reasons. He'll be encouraging me to ride faster because I'll see him sort of going off in the distance, so I've got to try and keep up. But also, if he's out in front, the air resistance is being broken by him. I can actually sit behind him, or Josh, or anybody else that we're riding with, and generally I'm doing 30% less work because I'm sitting behind them, and they're breaking all of the work. So the easiest way to get faster, to get to the goal that I'm trying to achieve, which is being faster, is to be around other people that are faster and to do it together as a group. So there's far more drag, there's far more less air resistance when two or three are gathered together, which is Matthew 16:20 in the cycling version. 18:20, sorry. So Data's been talking a lot recently about our plans for Alstonville Church for 2023. And there's two resolutions, if you like. The first is about Arsene, about biblical exercise. And he would like a set of plan for all of us to read the four Gospels together as a church. And there's some of you here thinking, oh, that's really easy. I've done that before. You flex that muscle of regular Bible study and you're in the discipline of doing that. And you're like the Nathan Brown of the cycling peloton. You can continue to do that. You can probably cope with a little bit of drag and resistance from the rest of us, but importantly, you're willing to take that space for the good of your teammates. But there's many of us that are not in that habit of reading the Bible regularly. And I'm going to put up my hand and say that I am one of those people that needs the support and assistance of other people to get into that habit. And just like riding a bike, like just trying to get onto the bike, to get into that habit of regular exercise, the ability to do it with somebody else, to have that commitment, to have that accountability, that is really important until I can find my rhythm and my fitness on the bike and find that habit so I can face those headwinds by myself. So for those of you that and I hope everybody wants to join on reading that as a church together over the course of 2023. The people that are in those regular habits, put up your hands and let us know who you are. And the people that need somebody to get around them to help them, we'd love to sort of team everybody up so that we can all get up those hills together. And I guess that's part of that protection strategy. You know, if you talk about people leaving the church and one of those reasons why people are leaving the church and when they're leaving the church, you might remember I said 70% of people weren't in that daily habit. So getting out those of us that are not in that daily habit, getting into that habit, that's about protecting us as a peloton, as a group. The second 2023 resolution is that our church is committed to seek out opportunities to welcome back the prodigal sons and daughters. Those lists of reasons, again, why people leave. I thought highly of it, but I had lost touch. I thought highly of it, but felt I could not live up to its standards. I felt that it lacked integrity in its behaviour or its theology. It had just become irrelevant in my life. I was angry over the way it treated me. I felt it was cold and inflexible. So I did a little bit more work and Googling and came across some really, really interesting stuff by an Adventist gentleman by the name of Dr. David Trim. Some of you probably know him. Spent a bit of time in Australia growing up, I understand. And he's the director of the Adventist Office of Archives, Statistics and Research at the General Conference. And I came across a YouTube interview with him. It's a 90-minute interview. Happy to share the link with any of you afterwards. And he had some really, really interesting stuff to say about what he calls lapsed membership or people that have left the church. And again, I just want to read some stuff that he said in that interview. He said, "I come from an academic background. I have a cognitive approach to life. For me, the doctrines are all important, the be-all and end-all, and I assumed it would be that for a lot of other people. And in Adventist universities where I speak, the audiences are sometimes shocked when the doctrine is not the main reason why people leave. Hey, it might be for you," he says, "but it's not for the mass of people out there," I tell them. The reason people leave the church is because of conflict overwhelmingly, or they face difficult life events. Things are just too complex, too hard to go to church, or they stop attending. And here's what happens. Nobody notices. Nobody reaches out. There is minimal contact. People that still essentially believe in the Bible just don't turn up. They essentially believe what we believe. They haven't left because they don't believe. They've just found life particularly difficult, sometimes because of another church member, and they just stop attending church. They don't mean it to become permanent, but no one really notices. They perceive that they weren't really that important to the wider life of the church. They see they can get on without church, and the longer it goes on, the harder it is to go back. And what I've learned over the years, it is not enough to encourage us to engage in a ministry of reconciliation with former members. It is no good getting them to come back if they experience the same situation when they came back. The congregation has to be welcoming. I've heard stories of people who muster the courage to come back only to get the cold shoulder. And he goes on further and he talks really humbly. It's really good. He says, "What do we as a church need to let go of?" He says, "It's really easy for me to say this. We need to let go of our pride. The notion that I am only right. There is only one way to do these things in church. We need to grow in Christ-like love for our brothers and sisters. It's much easier said than done, but not necessarily what is emphasised in our local churches. And sometimes there is no emphasis on instilling Christ-likeness and love in church members or each other. We need to truly see the people in the pews next to us as our brothers and sisters." Like the first of those resolutions, the second requires us to approach this goal as a group a little bit like a cycling peloton. We cannot possibly get to this goal by ourselves as individuals. We need to work together as a group. And that's going to be tricky, and we're going to have to ask ourselves some tough questions. Are we being consumed with our own needs as a church? Are we seeing the spiritual needs of people around us? It's not about me, it's about us. Is my pride and my sense of being right, is that overpowering the unity of the church? Do each of us truly love the brothers and sisters in the pews today that were here previously, and hopefully will one day be in the pews again? If we are truly to be the church that welcomes back those that have sat in the pews in times before us, I quickly suggest to you 4 principles from the story of the prodigal son around the father. The first is, the father is patient. The lost son was gone for a long time. In fact, there was a famine that came along, and yet he waited and he waited and he waited. And indeed, he was ready to see the son coming from a long way off. He was there, he was prepared, and he saw him. So, patience. The father was really quick to forgive. The son actually didn't even get out his offer about being a servant before his father was already calling the servants to get out those best robes and get the banquet ready. The father is loving. There was no "I told you so." There was no "I hope you learnt your lesson." Whatever fear and trepidation the son had in return was quickly gone when he saw his father already running towards him. And for those that are coming back to church, like walking through that door for the first time, that's incredibly stressful point in time. What's going to happen to me when I walk through those doors again? And so how are we that father running out looking for those people? And finally, the father had his priorities right. It didn't matter about the sins. It didn't matter if the inheritance was lost. It wasn't the dishonor to the family. All that mattered was the son was home. As you reflect on the year that was, and we focus on the year to come, may we be a haven for those that were sitting in the pigs in the foreign land. May this be a haven for them to come home. May we as Alstonville Church prepare ourselves and challenge ourselves to look inwardly on how we might be like the Father. How can we have that patience to continue to wait at the front gate, to be ready, and to be filled with compassion and run and embrace those prodigal sons? Amen.